Long before maps or roads existed, people moved goods across entire continents. Prehistoric societies mastered the art of creating long-range trade corridors through the planet's most challenging terrain. By the end of this exploration, you will understand the incredible ingenuity that connected our ancient world. How did travelers navigate trackless wilderness without a compass? What social codes allowed strangers to trade in safety? The answers reveal a hidden network of pathways that shaped human destiny. What does this deep need to connect tell you about us today? The artisan's hands moved with practiced skill, chipping away at a glossy black stone. He was creating a blade of exceptional sharpness, a tool that would one day slice through hide and sinew with ease. Yet the material he held did not come from the hills surrounding his village. This was obsidian, a volcanic glass born from mountains he would never see. His careful work was the starting point for a journey he could never imagine. This fundamental need for resources drove the very first exchanges. In a world without local sources of flint or specific shells for ornaments, communities had to look outward. Obtaining a superior stone for tools meant the difference between a successful hunt and hardship. Acquiring a rare, iridescent seashell for a necklace could elevate an individual's standing, weaving threads of social status into the fabric of daily life. These items were not mere commodities. They were instruments of survival, symbols of prestige, and essential components of cultural and ceremonial practices. This early trade sprang from a deep human impulse to connect and share, to improve one's life through contact with the world beyond the horizon. Those first, tentative handoffs of a blade or a bead were monumental. They transformed self-sufficient groups into something new, interconnected societies. That foundational urge to reach out set the stage for the next, even more daring step, the physical journey across a vast and untamed land. Their journey began not with a map but with the sky. A trader looked upward, finding his direction in the sun's daily arc and the fixed pivot of the North Star once darkness fell. He learned to listen to the wind, feeling its direction on his skin and understanding the stories it carried about the land ahead. He watched the purposeful flight of birds and the well-worn paths of migrating herds, seeing them not as random movements but as living signposts etched into the world. Rivers became his guides, their flowing water a promise of a path through even the densest woodland. This was not a single skill, but a deep and layered understanding of the natural world. He could read subtle shifts in the types of plants growing, noticing how certain trees favored one slope of a hill over another. He recognized that a particular rock formation, a strangely shaped hill on the horizon, marked a crucial turning point. This knowledge was a sacred inheritance, passed carefully from elder to youth through stories and songs, creating a living mental map of a continent. It was an environmental literacy we have largely forgotten, an ability to see the invisible roads written upon the earth and sky. How did they cross territories belonging to others without conflict? The elder's voice, seasoned and steady, wove a tapestry of words in the firelight. He was not merely telling a story, he was transmitting a map. For the young initiates listening, every twist in the tale was a bend in a distant river, every heroic encounter a marker for a place where one could find safe passage or a welcoming group. The precise location of a hidden spring was not a dry fact to be memorized, but the prize in a story about a thirsty ancestor and a guiding spirit. This was the genius of oral tradition, a cultural technology transforming critical navigation data into unforgettable narrative. Landmarks, water sources, and potential challenges were all encoded within the rhythm of songs and the plots of foundational myths. These stories were filled with mnemonic devices, turning a long sequence of turns and terrain features into an easy-to-recall sequence of events and characters. A list of 50 waypoints is forgettable, but a hero's journey past a talking tree, a stone giant, and a singing river is remembered for a lifetime. This living database was constantly refined. When a trader returned from a journey with news of a new landslide that blocked a path, or a previously unknown group offering hospitality, the stories would be updated. The elder would incorporate these new details, ensuring the next telling reflected the ever-changing reality of the route. The landscape provided the physical path, but it was the spoken word that gave it meaning, memory, and longevity. This collective knowledge held in the minds of the people was as vital as any tool they carried. So how did these intricate routes, held so carefully in memory and story, translate into tangible, physical markers across the vast and empty land? The landscape itself was the next great challenge to be mastered. Think of a trader standing before a raging river, its waters swollen with snowmelt, or gazing up at the sheer rock face of a mountain pass. With no bridges or tunnels, the journey required more than just courage. It demanded a deep, practical wisdom. For a wide river, the solution was not to fight the current but to understand it. They learned to construct simple rafts from materials found along the banks, lashing logs together with tough vines. They knew to cross at specific points where the water ran wider and shallower, or to wait for the late summer when river levels dropped. In the mountains, they did not charge straight up the steepest slope. Instead, they followed the wisdom of the animals, seeking out the high valleys and saddles between peaks that offered the most navigable path. These were not random choices, but the result of generations of accumulated experience. They learned to read the signs of impending danger, a sudden shift in the wind that warned of a coming storm in the high country, or the specific sound of the river that hinted at a flash flood far upstream. The safest route was rarely a straight line. It was a carefully chosen series of steps that balanced the physical effort required against the risks involved and the ultimate reward of reaching the other side. A longer path that avoided a treacherous swamp or a bandit-prone canyon was always the better choice. In this way, the most formidable geographic barriers did not just block travel, they actively sculpted it. They forced the creation of specific, optimized corridors that became the superhighways of their time. This intricate knowledge of how to move through the world was priceless, but it was useless without one more crucial element: a system of trust that allowed a traveler from one valley to safely interact with a community from the next. That first tentative meeting at a neutral riverbank was a fragile moment. Two groups stood facing one another, separated by more than just distance. Their languages were different, their customs unfamiliar. The air was thick with a mixture of caution and a powerful, mutual curiosity. In that silence, before a single object was traded, the real work began. It was not the work of commerce but of connection. The first exchange was often not a trade at all, but a gift. A beautifully crafted item offered with an open hand was a language everyone understood. It was a sign of peaceful intent, a gesture that said, "We come not to take but to share." These initial gifts were the seeds from which mighty relationships grew. Through repeated encounters at the same seasonal meeting places, a basic, shared language would emerge. It was a simple trade jargon, a collection of words and hand signals for essential items, numbers, and directions. This pidgin tongue became the bridge across which not only goods but also ideas could travel. The most powerful bonds were often sealed by kinship. When a person from one community married into another, they became a living link. This created a network of relatives, a web of obligation and protection that stretched for hundreds of miles. A traveler could now mention the name of a cousin or an in-law in a distant village and be welcomed not as a stranger but as family. These social protocols were the true infrastructure, more vital than any physical path. The well-worn trail through the forest was just a route. The trust between the people who used it was what made it a corridor. Elaborate rituals of greeting, shared meals, and the slow, careful building of a reputation for fairness, these were the invisible pillars holding up the entire system. They transformed a potentially dangerous encounter into a predictable, mutually beneficial exchange. This intricate social machinery allowed resources to flow, but it also allowed for something even more profound to travel along those same paths. The true weight of these trade networks was carried on human shoulders. Picture a line of figures moving in single file along a narrow trail, each person bearing a heavy load strapped to their back or balanced carefully on their head. This was the reality of long-distance transport long before the wheel or domesticated pack animals. Every precious item that traveled hundreds of miles did so because of sheer physical endurance and coordinated communal effort. The selection of what was worth moving was a critical calculation. Only objects with an extremely high value for their weight made the cut. A small pouch of flawless obsidian cores, a bundle of vibrant tropical bird feathers, or a carefully wrapped string of rare seashells, these were the ideal cargo. A bulky, heavy item of low value would never survive the economic logic of the journey. The immense labor invested in moving these goods transformed them, infusing a simple stone or shell with layers of social meaning far beyond its material worth. The journey itself was a meticulously planned operation. It was not a single, desperate sprint. Knowledgeable groups established a chain of movement, planning for rest stops at known water sources and leaving hidden food caches along the route for the next traveling party. In some cases, a relay system developed where goods were passed from one community to the next, each group responsible for the leg of the journey through their own familiar territory. A trader from the coast might hand his shells to a partner in the foothills, who would then carry them up to a contact in the highlands. This handoff system distributed the physical burden and leveraged local expertise, creating a seamless web of exchange across incredible distances. The sheer exertion required, the countless steps taken, and the sweat expended was a direct measure of an item's importance. It was a testament to the powerful human drives for connection, status, and survival that made such back-breaking effort not just worthwhile but essential. A single piece of this northern gold, warmed by the sun, holds the memory of an epic journey. Amber from the cold shores of the Baltic Sea found its way into the royal workshops of the Mediterranean, a journey of over 1,000 miles that connected the ancient world. This was not a single road but a fluid, breathing network of trails we now call the amber routes. For thousands of years, this precious substance flowed south, navigating a world of immense challenge and opportunity. The path began in dense, old-growth forests where sunlight barely touched the ground. Here, gatherers collected the golden resin from the coast, each piece a captured moment of prehistoric life. The initial leg of the journey was a waterborne one, with logs of amber floated down rivers like the Vistula, moving the heavy material efficiently before the real overland trek began. From the riverbanks, human carriers took over, guiding the precious cargo through a labyrinth of trails that wound through dark woods and across vast plains. They did not travel blindly. They moved from one known intermediary settlement to the next, a chain of handoffs that stretched across the continent. At each stop, the amber would be evaluated, perhaps worked into a rough shape, and then passed along to the next group of specialists in movement. This was a relay race spanning generations, where a single piece of amber might change hands a dozen times before reaching its final destination. The route was a living entity, constantly shifting. A conflict between two tribes might close a path for a century, forcing the trade to find a new corridor through a different valley. A change in climate could make a mountain pass too dangerous, rerouting the entire flow of goods for generations. The web of trails adapted, proving the network's resilience was not in its fixed geography, but in the social knowledge of its people. The proof of its success lies in the most unexpected of places. Archaeologists have found beads of unmistakable Baltic amber in the royal burial sites of Mycenaean Greece and within the tomb of the Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun. In these silent, sun-baked chambers, the northern gold had completed its transformation. It was no longer just tree resin. It was a symbol of power, a piece of magic from the edge of the known world, and a tangible thread connecting vastly different civilizations. This single commodity forged an intercontinental link that endured for millennia. But amber was not the only substance to weave such a web. Another material, even more essential to human progress, was already tracing its own paths across the globe. A simple strap across the forehead could carry the weight of continents. This was the tumpline, a device of such elegant simplicity it transformed the very physics of long-distance travel. By shifting the burden from the shoulders and arms to the powerful muscles of the neck and back, it allowed a single person to carry a load that would otherwise be impossible. Their hands were now free to grasp a walking staff, steady themselves on a steep slope, or even perform tasks while on the move. This was not just an invention, it was a fundamental breakthrough in human endurance. It directly answered the relentless logistical question of early trade: how to move more, farther, with less exhaustion. Alongside the tumpline, a whole ecosystem of carrying technologies evolved. Artisans wove intricate baskets with wide, comfortable straps that distributed weight evenly. They crafted nets from strong plant fibers, perfect for securing oddly shaped or bulky items like dried fish or lightweight pottery. For the most fragile cargo, like delicate shell beads or precious ochre pigments, they designed padded slings that cradled the contents safely against the body. Each tool was a specialized response to a specific challenge of the trail. The development of these technologies had a cascading effect on what could be traded. Suddenly, it became feasible to transport slightly heavier, bulkier goods that were still high in value. A larger block of salt, a bigger bundle of medicinal herbs, or a more substantial ceremonial axe could now make the journey. This expanded the economic possibilities, making trade ventures more profitable and sustainable for the communities involved. In the grand story of prehistoric exchange, these humble carrying devices were the unsung heroes. They were the prehistoric equivalent of the modern shipping container, a standardized and incredibly efficient solution to the problem of moving goods across vast distances. They turned a monumental physical challenge into a manageable task, one steady step at a time. With their bodies now serving as more efficient engines of transport, these ancient traders could turn their minds to an even greater challenge: navigating the complex social landscape that lay between the resources and the people who desired them. Every step beyond the safety of familiar landmarks was a step into uncertainty. The ancient trader carried more than goods on his back. He carried the heavy responsibility of diplomacy. His journey was a continuous negotiation with the unknown, where a single misstep or misunderstood gesture could unravel years of carefully built relationships. To move safely, these travelers relied on a sophisticated, unspoken language of peace. They carried with them recognized tokens, objects whose meaning was clear across linguistic divides. A specific type of shell necklace, a staff carved with a unique pattern, or a polished stone amulet, these were not mere decorations. They were passports and safe conduct agreements made physical. Displaying these symbols at a distance signaled peaceful intent. identifying the bearer as a participant in the sacred system of exchange, not a raider or a threat. The most crucial spaces were the neutral grounds, a wide, shallow river ford where multiple trails converged, or a high mountain meadow that belonged to no single group. These places became sacred through tradition. Here, a temporary but powerful truce was universally observed. Weapons were set aside, and the normal tensions between neighbors were suspended for the duration of the gathering. At these sites, the primary currency was not goods but trust, built through elaborate ceremonial greetings and the exchange of gifts that solidified alliances. The role of the neutral intermediary was paramount. These were individuals, sometimes entire families, renowned for their fairness and their connections to multiple groups. They could vouch for a stranger's character, translate not just words but intentions, and smooth over disputes before they escalated. They were the essential human glue that held the network together. The stakes of this diplomatic dance could not be higher. A failed negotiation meant more than just the loss of a valuable load of obsidian or amber. It could mean the loss of life, shattering the fragile web of kinship that made travel possible. A single violent incident could cause a vital trade route to be abandoned for generations, severing connections between entire regions and plunging communities back into isolation. The memory of such a conflict could linger for centuries, a ghost story told to warn the young against venturing too far. This constant, careful management of risk was the invisible foundation of every successful journey. It required an intuitive understanding of human nature, a deep respect for custom, and the courage to extend an open hand into the silence. The professional trader was a new kind of human, a living bridge. He was neither fully of his home village nor a true member of the distant communities he visited. His identity was forged on the trail, defined by the unique knowledge he carried. He held mental maps of safe passages, a working vocabulary of several trade jargons, and a deep understanding of the delicate social protocols required at each stop along his circuit. This was not a part-time occupation. It was a calling that demanded a lifetime of learning and risk, making him an indispensable node in the expanding network. His value lay in his connections. A trader could mention a name from 3 valleys away and be welcomed with a meal instead of suspicion. He knew which group prized a particular type of red ochre for their ceremonies, and which coastal village would exchange it for high-quality flint. This specialized knowledge became his capital, more valuable than the goods he carried on his back. Over generations, these individuals began to recognize their shared challenges and interests. While formal guilds were still millennia in the future, loose associations naturally formed. They were partnerships of convenience and mutual protection. At seasonal gathering places, these traders would share vital information about route conditions, settle disputes over exchange rates, and agree on standard measures for goods. A handful of seashells of a certain size might become the agreed-upon unit for a basket of salt, creating a primitive but effective system of value that everyone could trust. This was the beginning of an economic system. The most experienced traders would take on apprentices, often their own kin, passing down the sacred knowledge of the routes. A young person would learn not just how to navigate by the stars, but how to read the body language of a wary chieftain, how to negotiate without words, and how to build a reputation for fairness that would outlive any single transaction. This specialization allowed societies to flourish in new ways. Not every individual had to be an expert hunter, a skilled toolmaker, and a daring traveler. A village could now focus on perfecting its craft, knowing a trusted trader would arrive with the materials they needed and take their finished products to a world of eager recipients. The emergence of this professional class marked a quiet revolution. It was the moment when connection itself became a profession, and the flow of ideas and objects began to shape the destiny of humanity in ways no one could yet fully comprehend. The mountain pass was a race against time. A sudden shift in the wind carried the unmistakable scent of snow, a chilling warning that the corridor through the peaks would soon seal itself shut for the season. Every decision in this ancient trade network was governed by a clock that was not made of gears, but of weather patterns, animal behavior, and the slow turn of the stars. These traders were not just travelers, they were master schedulers whose survival depended on a profound, intimate understanding of the Earth's rhythms. They knew that a journey begun 2 weeks too late could end in tragedy, the path home blocked by impassable drifts. This was a life lived in harmony with a complex ecological calendar. They planned their movements around the great migrations of caribou or bison, using the movement of the herds as both a guide and a potential food source for the long journey ahead. Their schedule was dictated by the agricultural cycles of the settled communities they visited. Arriving at a river valley village during the harvest festival, when food was plentiful and people were in a celebratory mood, was a calculated move. It turned a simple trade into a social event, strengthening bonds and ensuring better exchanges. They possessed a granular knowledge of their routes that we can scarcely comprehend. They knew which river, swollen with spring meltwater, was a roaring, uncrossable torrent in 1 month, but a manageable network of braided streams just 2 months later. They understood that a specific desert trail, lethal under the blistering summer sun, became a viable shortcut for a few precious weeks in the cool, damp grip of winter. This was not guesswork, it was a precise and perishable science passed down through generations. Their calendar was written in the blooming of a particular flower on a hillside, signaling it was time to begin the trek to the coastal shell grounds. It was etched in the departure of certain birds, a sign that the window for crossing the high plains was closing. This deep timekeeping allowed them to synchronize with massive seasonal gatherings, the prehistoric equivalent of international trade fairs. Dozens of different groups, speaking a multitude of languages, would all converge on a traditional neutral ground at the same predicted time, drawn there by a shared understanding of the natural world's schedule. This intricate dance with the climate was the final, indispensable layer of the trade network, a testament to human adaptability and our enduring need to connect, regardless of the obstacles placed by the planet itself. That jade axe head, cool and smooth in a British chieftain's hand, began its life locked deep in the Alps. It never felled a tree or carved a piece of wood. Its purpose was far greater. It was a symbol, a physical piece of power whose value was not in its utility, but in its story. The most astonishing artifacts that moved across the ancient world were often these prestige goods, items whose worth was almost entirely social and symbolic. Think of iridescent tropical bird feathers used in a headdress far from any jungle, or a glistening block of salt presented as a gift to a leader. These were not items for daily survival. They were the currency of influence used to secure alliances, display authority, and connect to the spiritual realm. Their power came from a potent combination of rarity and distance. A local flint tool was practical, but a jade axe from a mythical mountain range halfway across the continent was extraordinary. Its very existence in your possession whispered a compelling story to your followers and rivals. It said that your influence stretched beyond the horizon, that you had access to networks and knowledge others did not. The immense difficulty of the journey, the countless hands it passed through, and the sheer improbability of its presence all amplified its worth. This created a self-perpetuating cycle of desire. The demand from emerging elites for these exotic markers of status is what justified the immense risk and effort of the trade. A chief who could distribute rare shells or unusual stones to his loyal followers strengthened his position, binding them to him with gifts that spoke of his far-reaching connections. In this way, the flow of luxury goods did more than move objects. It wove an invisible web of social and political influence that could bind a continent. Leaders separated by language and culture were unknowingly participants in a shared system of value, where a piece of stone from a distant quarry could dictate power dynamics in a land it never originated from. The deep blue stone was born from fire and pressure in the remote mountains of what is now Afghanistan. Locked within those stark peaks, Lapis Lazuli held a color like no other, a shade of midnight sky speckled with golden pyrite that refused to fade with time. To obtain it, miners worked in incredibly challenging conditions, extracting the precious material to feed a desire that would eventually stretch across the known world. This was not a short journey or a sporadic exchange. The Lapis Lazuli trade from the mines of Badakhshan to the sun-baked palaces of the Egyptian pharaohs stands as one of history's most astonishing examples of a sustained supply chain, a river of blue stone that flowed for thousands of years. Its very persistence reveals a level of international coordination that seems almost modern, yet it was achieved long before the first alphabet was invented. The route was a masterpiece of logistical planning. From the high mountains, the raw lapis was carried south and west, navigating the treacherous passes of the Hindu Kush. It then entered the vastness of the Iranian plateau, where it was funneled through a series of intermediary cities. These urban centers acted as clearing houses, where the raw stone was often roughly shaped into manageable blocks or beads, adding value before the next, even longer leg of the journey. From there, the lapis moved into the heart of the Mesopotamian world, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. In the bustling markets of great cities like the stone was traded, valued, and then sent onward, sometimes overland and sometimes by ship, traveling down the length of the Persian Gulf and up the Red Sea, finally crossing the desert into the Nile Valley. This was not a single path but a network of possibilities, a web of trails and sea lanes that adapted to the politics and climate of the era. What could possibly justify such an immense, multi-generational effort? The answer lies in the stone's unique cultural power. In Egypt, this vibrant blue was more than a decorative color, it was divine. It represented the heavens and the life-giving waters of the Nile. Egyptian artisans ground the lapis into a fine powder to create the most precious of pigments for eye shadow, believing it had protective qualities. They inlaid it into the gold masks of pharaohs and the walls of tombs, ensuring the deceased would carry a piece of the eternal sky into the afterlife. A piece of lapis lazuli in an Egyptian royal workshop was not just a gem, it was a piece of cosmic order. Its value was so immense that it fueled the entire economic engine of its journey. The countless hands that moved it, from miner to caravan driver, from Mesopotamian merchant to Egyptian priest, were all linked by a shared recognition of its worth. This single commodity created an invisible thread connecting the mountain cultures of Central Asia with the river civilization of Egypt, proving that human desire could build bridges across continents long before empires even thought to map them. The gentle dip of a paddle was the sound of a logistical revolution. That dugout canoe, carved from a single massive tree trunk and laden with goods, could carry a cargo 20 times heavier than a single person could manage on foot. It turned a winding, obstacle-strewn river into a smooth, flowing highway, propelling trade into a new era of efficiency and scale. From simple rafts lashed together from buoyant logs to sophisticated boats with planks sewn together with tough fibers and sealed with tar, every society developed watercraft perfectly suited to their local environment. On calm inland lakes, wide, stable vessels carried entire communities and their possessions. On fast-moving rivers, sleek, maneuverable canoes allowed traders to navigate rapids and shallows. But the most daring development was the mastery of the coastline itself. Long before anyone dared to sail out of sight of land, ancient mariners practiced a technique we call coastal hopping. They would set sail from one headland, keeping the familiar shoreline in view until the next visible landfall appeared on the horizon. In this way, they inched their way along entire continents, island by island, headland by headland, creating a maritime corridor that connected distant worlds. This was not a reckless plunge into the unknown, but a careful, calculated expansion of the known world. A trader might learn that a day's paddle to the north lay a bay where a certain type of highly valued shell could be found. The community there, in turn, knew of a group another day's journey to the west who produced exceptional fishing nets. Step by step, these coastal connections were forged, creating a chain of interdependence that spanned thousands of miles of shoreline. The ability to move heavy, bulky items by water transformed what could be traded. Large, finely made clay pots, which would have been impossibly fragile and heavy to carry overland, could now be safely stacked in the hull of a boat. Blocks of stone for making ceremonial axes, logs of prized timber, even large quantities of dried fish and grain, all became part of the flow of commerce. The water did not just carry goods, it carried ideas, styles, and people, weaving the fates of coastal communities into a single, interconnected tapestry, long before their inland neighbors even knew the other existed. The trader's pack was heavy, but its most precious contents were not for trade. Wrapped carefully in leaves and hide were dense cakes of rendered fat and dried meat, a compact store of energy meant to last for days. This was the first and most crucial layer of survival, that carried provisions that provided a vital buffer against the unpredictable landscape. Yet no journey could rely on stored food alone. The wait would become impossible, and the supplies would eventually run out. The true skill lay in knowing how to read the land as a living pantry. A seasoned traveler knew which valleys held groves of nut-bearing trees at precisely the right time for harvest. He knew the stretches of river where the water ran shallow over gravel beds, perfect for a seasonal fish run that could feed his entire party for days. This was not random foraging, it was a scheduled resupply timed to the Earth's own calendar. The rhythm of the trek was often set by these opportunities. A group might hurry their pace to reach a particular berry patch before the bears and birds stripped it clean, or they might pause their journey for several days to dry and smoke a sudden bounty of fish, preserving it for the leaner stretches ahead. But the most reliable source of sustenance often came not from the wilderness, but from the people who lived within it. This is where the social fabric of the trade network proved its worth beyond the exchange of goods. A trader arriving at a familiar settlement was often greeted with a shared meal. This was more than hospitality, it was a practical necessity. The local community provided the calories needed to continue the journey, and in return they received news from distant places, the latest styles in toolmaking, and of course, the exotic items the trader carried. A failed hunt or a missed seasonal harvest could spell disaster, turning a profitable expedition into a desperate struggle. The ability to consistently find food was what separated the successful professional from the lost novice. This constant, quiet negotiation with hunger was the steady, underlying beat of every long-distance trek, a daily reminder that the most valuable currency on the open trail was not a rare stone or shell, but a simple, nourishing meal. The clamor of a dozen different languages filled the air at the river confluence, a sound not of confusion but of commerce. This was a neutral trading post, a temporary city that bloomed for a few precious days before vanishing back into the landscape. Its location was no accident, situated on a boundary between tribal territories, a place that belonged to everyone and no one. For the duration of the gathering, ancient rivalries were set aside, and a powerful collective truce took hold. The risk of conflict, ever present in one-on-one encounters, was dramatically reduced within this controlled, ceremonial space. The timing was equally deliberate, often scheduled after a successful harvest or a major religious observance, when communities were well provisioned and in a celebratory mood. This convergence of place and time created a perfect storm for exchange. A person from the mountains could lay out their finely crafted obsidian blades next to a coastal trader displaying strings of iridescent mother-of-pearl. A potter from the plains might demonstrate the unique properties of her clay vessels to a woodworker from the forest. The sheer diversity of goods was staggering, but the true trade was far richer than the objects on display. A new method for hafting an axe, a design for a more efficient fish trap, or a forgotten verse from an ancestral migration song, these intangible treasures moved through the crowd just as freely. Marriages were arranged, weaving new strands of kinship into the social fabric and ensuring safe passage for future travelers. These seasonal fairs were the internet of their day, a hub for the rapid transmission of innovation and culture. They transformed isolated discoveries into continental trends, ensuring that a better idea born in one valley could, within a generation, take root in 100 others. This vibrant, temporary world was the engine of progress, proving that when people gather with a shared purpose, the distance between worlds shrinks to nothing. That silent piece of obsidian on the lab bench has a story to tell. In an archaeological laboratory, a scientist passes a handheld device over its glossy black surface. This is an X-ray fluorescence spectrometer, and it is not just analyzing the stone, it is listening for its origin story. Every volcanic source on Earth has a unique chemical recipe, a specific blend of elements that acts as an undeniable fingerprint. The machine reads this signature, matching the artifact to a specific flow in a mountain range hundreds of miles away. This is the quiet revolution in our understanding of ancient trade, transforming a beautiful object into a data point on a vast prehistoric map. The evidence is rarely a labeled crate or a written receipt. It is a scatter of clues left behind for millennia. Archaeologists piece together the narrative by mapping the distribution of distinctive materials. Finding a cache of seashells from the Gulf of Mexico at a settlement in the Rocky Mountains is not just a curiosity, it is a smoking gun. It marks the end point of an incredible journey. Stylistic influence is another powerful clue. When a local potter suddenly starts adding designs to her work that are unmistakably linked to a culture a continent away, it signals more than just a fleeting fashion. It speaks of sustained contact, of ideas traveling along the same paths as goods, changing local traditions through the subtle power of cultural exchange. The most personal evidence comes from the resting places of the travelers themselves. Isotope analysis of human remains can reveal a life story written in bone and tooth enamel. The water and food a person consumes as a child leaves a specific isotopic signature from their homeland. When scientists find an individual buried in one valley whose isotopes point to a childhood in a distant coastal region, they have found direct proof of a person's movement, a life spent bridging worlds. These scientific techniques are like turning on a light in a dark room. We are no longer just guessing about the scale and complexity of these networks. We are mapping them with scientific precision. The silent testimony of a single shell, a potsherd, or a fragment of bone continues to piece together the hidden maps our ancestors carried in their minds and their stories, revealing a world far more connected than we ever dreamed. The silence of the trail was a different kind of sound. For months, the only voices a trader heard were those of his companions or the cautious greetings of strangers. The familiar laughter of his own children, the comforting cadence of his village's stories told by the fire, these became distant memories, precious and painful to recall. This profound isolation was a constant companion, a psychological weight as heavy as any pack. Every step took him further from the world he knew and deeper into a realm of pure uncertainty, where the maps were not drawn on hide but etched into memory and myth. The stress was relentless. Every shadow in the forest could be a predator, every unfamiliar group a potential threat. He slept with one ear open, his mind always calculating risks. But the greatest challenge was often spiritual. He was moving through landscapes imbued with meaning by others, places that local stories described as the homes of powerful spirits or the resting places of ancient heroes. A strangely shaped rock formation wasn't just a landmark, it was a being to be appeased. A sudden gust of wind on a mountain pass wasn't just weather, it was a message. To navigate this, he clung to his own traditions with fierce devotion. He carried small amulets from his homeland, performed miniature rituals at crossroads, and whispered the songs of his ancestors for courage. This faith was his anchor, a psychological tether stretching all the way back to his community, assuring him he was not truly alone. The success of a journey, therefore, was not just a test of endurance, but a triumph of the human spirit over fear and loneliness. It required a deep, quiet resilience that is difficult for us to fully grasp today. How did these fragile networks of trust and trade not only survive but actually expand over centuries? The answer lies in a slow, quiet transformation that reshaped the world itself. The potter's hand stilled as she watched the trader demonstrate. He did not have a new pot to sell her, but something far more valuable, a new way of building the fire. He stacked the fuel in an open lattice instead of a dense pile, creating a draft that pulled the heat to a far more intense and consistent temperature. In that single, shared moment, her entire craft was transformed. This was the silent, invisible cargo that moved along the trade corridors, a cargo of ideas that would outlast any object. These networks were the world's first information superhighways, transmitting revolutionary concepts in agriculture, tool making, and social organization at a speed that migration could never match. A new technique for grinding stone, discovered in one isolated valley, could ripple outward across 1,000 miles within a few generations, passed from one community to the next by traders who understood its worth. This constant, low-level exchange of knowledge created a remarkable phenomenon, a slow but steady technological homogenization across staggering distances. Archaeologists find it all the time, a nearly identical style of fishhook appearing along coastlines separated by vast stretches of ocean, or a specific method for hafting an axe head becoming standard practice across an entire continent. This was not a coincidence. It was the result of countless conversations at river crossings and seasonal fairs, where the most efficient solutions to universal human problems were shared, adopted, and refined. The trade in obsidian and amber forged the physical links, but the trade in ideas gave those links a permanent, world-changing purpose. It meant that human progress was no longer a series of isolated sparks, but a steadily growing fire, its warmth shared by all who were connected to the web. So what happened when this intricate, resilient system finally met a force it could not adapt to, when the world itself began to change? The smoke from the ceremonial fire curled upward, carrying the community's hopes to the sky. Before the first pack was even shouldered, the elders would gather the departing traders for a ritual of protection, calling upon ancestral spirits and powerful deities to guard the path ahead. This was not a mere superstition, it was a vital piece of social and psychological infrastructure. By placing the entire venture under a sacred mandate, the community transformed a risky economic expedition into a spiritually sanctioned mission. The goods themselves were often more than mere objects. A block of salt from a particular sacred mountain spring, or a bundle of feathers from a bird believed to be a messenger of the gods, carried a divine charge. To exchange such an item was not a simple transaction. It was a transfer of spiritual power, an act that reinforced the cosmic order. This religious framework provided a universal moral code for interaction in a world without international courts or written contracts. A trader who cheated his partner was not just breaking a business agreement, he was offending the very spirits who guaranteed the safety of the journey, risking divine retribution that could affect his entire village. This shared layer of belief created an unexpected common ground between people of different languages and customs. Pilgrimage routes to a distant sacred site often became the very same paths used by traders, the flow of faithful feet keeping the trails clear and the resting places maintained. A trader traveling to a holy mountain to obtain a sacred stone was both a merchant and a pilgrim, his commercial goals sanctified by his spiritual intent. This fusion of faith and commerce built a powerful, resilient trust. It meant that your trading partner, though a stranger, likely honored the same fundamental principles you did. He would understand the significance of an oath sworn over a shared ritual meal, and he would fear the consequences of breaking it. In this way, the gods and ancestors became the silent partners in every exchange, the invisible guarantors of a deal, watching over the fragile human networks that were slowly weaving the world together. A massive circle of shells, taller than a person and wide enough to encircle a village, stands silent in the coastal forest. These are the shell rings of the American Southeast, mysterious monuments built from the daily meals of countless generations. They were not simply garbage dumps, but rather the permanent, physical anchors of a vibrant trade network that connected worlds. Picture this place not as a silent ruin, but as a bustling, seasonal hub. The air would have been thick with the scent of wood smoke and the sea, ringing with the sounds of different languages and the lively barter of a market day. Here, people from the interior would bring their finely knapped stone tools, strong wooden implements, and perhaps precious medicinal herbs. In return, they sought the ocean's bounty, barrels of rich, salted fish, and most importantly, the shells themselves. These shells were not just food. The tough, dense shells of the quahog clam and the whelk were raw material for some of the most important tools of the era, transformed through painstaking labor into sharp hoes for tilling soil, sturdy axes for woodworking, and beautiful beads that served as both decoration and a primitive form of currency. The very act of building the ring was a profound social exercise, the communal work of gathering, feasting, and deliberately placing the shells created a shared identity and a powerful sense of collective purpose. This reinforced the trust and mutual obligation that made long-distance trade possible, turning strangers into partners. The proof of this network's reach is etched into the landscape. Archaeologists find distinct coastal shells, unmistakable in their origin, hundreds of miles inland, deposited at settlements far from any ocean. A single whelk shell tool discovered next to a river in the Appalachian foothills is a silent testament to a journey, a handoff, and a deal struck at the great circular meeting place by the sea. These rings were more than just markets, they were the beating heart of a social and economic system, leaving an enduring mark on the land that whispers of connection in a world we often mistake for being isolated. That moment of silence between two traders could stretch for an eternity. He holds up a single, flawless obsidian core, its edges glinting in the sun. The other trader gestures to a stack of woven baskets filled with dark, nutritious grain. No common words exist between them to name a number or state a price. This was the fundamental puzzle of prehistoric trade, a high-stakes negotiation where value was not printed on a coin, but had to be built from scratch in a shared space of mutual understanding. How many baskets for one core? The answer was never simple math. It was a complex calculation based on a shared, unspoken sense of scarcity and desire. The obsidian was not just a tool, it was a piece of a distant, powerful mountain, and the journey to bring it here was a story of risk and endurance. The grain represented a season of backbreaking labor, the fertility of the soil, and the very sustenance of a community. The traders were not just exchanging objects, they were translating entire worlds of effort and meaning. To bridge this gap, certain items began to stand out for their consistent and widely accepted worth. A specific type of cowrie shell, perhaps, or a standard-sized copper axe became a kind of universal measuring stick. You might not want the shells for themselves, but you knew with absolute certainty that everyone else in the network would accept them in trade for something you did want. These proto-currencies greased the wheels of the entire system, providing a stable medium that simplified the incredibly complex web of relative values. Yet, even with these aids, the process of barter remained a deeply social performance. It was a dance of proposal and counter-proposal, of reading body language and assessing trust. A trader known for fairness might receive a better rate than a newcomer because his good reputation was itself a form of capital. The haggling was not just about maximizing gain, it was about testing and reinforcing a relationship. This constant, daily exercise in comparing unlike things, in finding equivalence between a day's labor and a beautiful ornament, was quietly training the human mind to think in more abstract terms. It pushed cognition beyond the immediate and tangible toward the conceptual realms of relative value and universal equivalence. The marketplace, in its noisy, chaotic way, was the crucible where the very idea of economics was born, forged in the silent, thoughtful space between a basket of grain and a perfect blade of volcanic glass. The ghost of a prehistoric footpath lies buried just beneath the stones of a Roman road. If you could peel back the layers of history, you would find that many of the world's most famous historic routes were not sudden inventions, but brilliant refinements of trails forged thousands of years earlier. The foundational logic of those ancient travelers, their hard-won knowledge of the land's subtle grammar, created a template that empires would later adopt. The Silk Road, that legendary network linking East and West, did not spring from the mind of a single emperor. Its most vital arteries pulsed along corridors already known to nomadic herders and jade traders for millennia. They were the ones who first identified the narrow passes between impassable mountain ranges and the oases that offered life in the searing desert. The sprawling Incan road system, with its suspension bridges and stone-paved steps, often followed the precise routes of footpaths established by earlier cultures who understood the Andes in a way outsiders never could. The reason for this endurance is strikingly simple. The laws of geography are permanent. The lowest and safest pass through a mountain range does not change. The one place along a 100-mile river where the bedrock creates a solid, shallow ford remains the best crossing for all of human history. These were not arbitrary choices, they were the only logical solutions to the puzzle of the landscape. Prehistoric communities, through trial and error over generations, had already solved these puzzles. They found the grooves in the earth, the paths of least resistance that would naturally funnel movement. Empires, for all their power, were simply paving over these ancient solutions, formalizing a wisdom they had inherited. This deep continuity means that the flow of people, goods, and ideas has been channeled along these same corridors for thousands of years, decisively shaping which cultures interacted and which were left in isolation. It determined the location of future cities, the borders of nations, and the spread of technologies and beliefs. Even today, If you look at a map of our modern highways and railways, you can often see the faint, enduring imprint of those first tentative footfalls, a testament to the original surveyors of our world whose silent maps are still guiding us. Each traveler left a mark, a subtle pressure that accumulated over centuries. The steady passage of feet along a favored trail did not just pack the earth down, it slowly scraped the soil away, especially on steeper slopes where every step was a small landslide waiting to happen. In time, these gentle grooves could deepen into eroded gullies, permanently scarred by the relentless rhythm of human movement. At a popular resting place by a river bend, the story was written in the missing trees. Generations of travelers stopping to cook a meal or warm themselves through a cold night would have gathered the most accessible firewood first. Over the years, the circle of cleared forest would slowly expand outward from the campsite, a localized depletion that altered the immediate landscape for those who came later. Even the local wildlife felt the pressure. A particular type of freshwater mussel, prized for its iridescent shell, could be harvested to extinction along a heavily traveled stretch of river. A slow-moving, easily hunted ground bird might vanish from the vicinity of a well-used trail, its absence a quiet testament to the appetites of passing groups. Yet this human footprint was not solely one of loss. A trader, far from home, might share a handful of seeds from a particularly productive strain of grain, or a cutting from a fruit tree that grew well in his village. These intentional gifts of knowledge and biology could transform a region. An entirely new crop, adopted from distant neighbors, could take root in a new valley, diversifying local diets and increasing food security. Sometimes the spread was accidental. Seeds from a plant used to pack a fragile pot could fall to the ground at a campsite, sprouting the next season as a small, stubborn patch of a foreign species. These were the earliest, unintended experiments in globalization, where the very composition of a local ecosystem could be gently shifted by the contents of a traveler's pack. The relationship was a complex dialogue, not a simple exploitation. The environment shaped the routes, and the routes, in turn, began to gently reshape the environment. This delicate dance between human need and natural limitation set a profound precedent, establishing the first enduring patterns of how our species would alter the world it moved through. These ancient pathways are a testament to a deep human truth, our need to reach beyond the horizon. The story of prehistoric trade is not one of emperors and monuments, but of countless individuals whose names are lost to time. It is the story of the trader who memorized the stars, the elder who encoded a map into a song, and the families who forged bonds of kinship across vast distances. Their collective courage and ingenuity spun the first fragile threads of a global web, connecting the amber routes of the north to the Lapis Lazuli trails of the east long before anyone conceived of a map of the world. This hidden infrastructure of connection shaped everything that followed. The languages we speak carry echoes of those early trade jargons. The technologies that underpin our modern world, from agriculture to metallurgy, spread along these same corridors of exchange. The very idea of an interconnected society, where the fate of one community can ripple across a continent, was born on those silent, winding trails. Their legacy is not confined to museums, it is woven into the fabric of our daily lives. Look at the road you drive on or the river that flows through your town. Its path was likely first walked thousands of years ago by people carrying dreams and obsidian. We invite you to wonder about the deep history of your own region. What forgotten trading posts might lie beneath your city's streets? What local legends hint at journeys to faraway places? Share your discoveries and the mysteries of your corner of the world in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the deep past, subscribe for more explorations that uncover the hidden connections that shaped us.